But it's already 11.
Right.
Maybe we will let Jesse to introduce himself after your presentation, Jill, just so we can start with your topic here. And I'm going to be taking some questions. If any of you guys would like to ask Jill something at the end, please feel free to share your questions via private message or on the main live. And also feel free to share these presentations so more business owners learn about the topic that we're going to present today. So
Right.
Jill, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time.
No
And
worries.
welcome to this Facebook Live webinar. And please, the stage is yours.
Well, mahalo. And what we thought we would talk about today is really kind of, you know, when we think about the resiliency that's needed in times like this, in times of crisis, you know, we're smack dab in the middle of it right now, but soon we'll be moving beyond where we are. And I think with an eye towards that future, we need to begin right now to think about what it's going to look like in the next phase, right? What might potentially be happening later. So we'll start with just a quick look at the current state. We'll move forward into future state, and maybe we can gen some ideas that you can begin to think about in relation to your business about what things could look like next. Because I think all of us right now have a little extra time on our hands to maybe do some of that thinking. So we'll talk, like I said, just for a second on where we are now, the needs that we have right now. And really the needs as they relate to our employees and managing our businesses. And then we'll spend the bulk of I was all worried about Jesse. Now it was my turn. But anyway, you didn't miss anything.
Here we are.
Because I just wanted to talk about where we are now, and and really the three big ideas, I think, as far as having this remote social distancing, remote workforce, and that sort of thing. You know, before the pandemic, Zapier, which is a national, global, all 100% remote, they did a survey, and knowledge workers, 95% of knowledge workers said, I should be able to work from home. I want to work from home. You know, this is crazy. I ought to have that opportunity, because very few of us were really implementing these work from home strategies as it relates to the big picture of all the companies across the country. Well, I think now that we're all home, we go, it's not quite what we thought it was going to be. And maybe some of us are having some issues with it. And what it's kind of shined a light on for a lot of organizations is their management skills, right? It's different when they're in the office and you can see people and you can touch people and you can talk to people. Well, you're not supposed to touch them when you're in the office, but you know what I mean. But that you can be right there with them and have that ebb and flow of natural conversation. But when we're all working from, our living rooms, it's a little bit different. And communication has to stay at the heart of everything that you're doing as we live in this work from home kind of attitude. It's the success for every relationship, no matter what. In the office, out of the office, your personal relationships, but communication is really at the heart of success. And without structure, if you don't have structure in place for your folks, and I know that a lot of us had to kind of throw this work from home idea together at the very last minute. And so now is the time to bake in some structure because your efficiency will suffer without it. And never, not important, but compassion and motivation are more important than ever for our employees. Oops. Are you guys there?
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
here. I
Good,
just
good,
can't see
good.
your
Because you
picture.
disappeared off my screen for some crazy reason. Oh, well, what is happening? Like
If
technology
you can, you
glitches.
can reshare your screen.
Oh,
Jill.
okay, okay.
Mhm.
Thanks, guys. I'm so sorry for this.
No, it's okay.
Let's see. Let me get back into it and share my screen. And I can try to talk while I'm doing this, but I don't do that very well. So you'll just have to bear with me for a sec. There we go. Here we go, guys. Only be a second. So anyway, as I was saying, you know, communication's the heart. We need structure, and compassion and motivation is also super important. Just kind of highlighting some of those things when I talk about communication. Let me just do this. When I talk about communication, what I really mean is that we're talking about ideas around daily team communication, those stand-up huddles, just to get everybody on the same page, to have everybody doing what we need them to do all at the same time. I think that that's very, very critical. And as I was saying earlier, it's kind of exposed some of our management flaws, if you will. And so those of us that were prone to micromanage have been crazy during this time because we can't see anybody. We don't know what they're doing. And so our tendencies to micromanage have just exploded, right? But we need to dial that back a little bit. We need to give people maybe in their stand-up huddle meetings, and maybe that could help you with micromanaging, give them their daily expectations and then let them go do it. The other side of that is also these managers that are kind of MIA. Maybe you were a manager that didn't interact a lot with your people before. And so that's your natural tendency. But when everybody's working remotely, you're going to have to step up your game a little bit, right? You're going to have to check in with your folks because that individual communication is so, so important. They did a survey of people who work from home, and like 95% of those people said, yes, I am very, very connected to my team. I'm very connected, working from home, super connected to my team. But what they also said is I'm not connected to my leaders. I'm not connected to my manager. I'm not connected. Like 15% said that they felt connected to their home office. So 95% feels like they're connected to their team. Only 15% says that they feel connected to their managers or their home office. And what is that? Why is that important to you? Because ideas and innovation die if I don't feel some connectivity with my leadership. And we can't afford that. Right now is a time for innovations. We cannot afford to have our employees start to check out, if you will, and not feel connected and not feel engaged with our organization. And that kind of talks to that whole idea of structure too, right? Because you know, if we can create those mechanisms to give people what they're supposed to do and how to do it and the tools to do it, they can stay efficient. They know that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and can be productive for us. And that whole idea of compassion and motivation, what I'm talking about here is emotional intelligence. Got some people who love this idea of working remote because they're total introverts, right? And they're like, woohoo, I got space. I got, you know, I can do what I want. This is like my dream. And then you have other people like me that being alone is great. It's like, no, I don't want this. I'm dying for interaction and engagement. So as a manager, because what's your job as a manager, as a leader? Your job as a leader is to remove all the obstacles so the people that you hired to do things can do those, right? And so you have to understand what it's going to take for them to be able to do what it is that they do every day. So that idea of compassion and being able to speak into them specifically to motivate is more important than ever. So, okay, that's enough about where we are current state. So now for something completely different. Let's spend the rest of our minutes talking about, okay, so here we are, and I've got my stand-up meetings going. We have, you know, virtual happy hours every Thursday. We've got all these things that we learned as best practices for working from home, but this may end. this may start to end, just in a couple of weeks. And as we try to return to something else, what's going to be left behind because of this pandemic? What's the future possibly going to look like? And I would ascertain a lot of the things that we'll talk about are things that we have been talking about for a long time, ideas that we thought we wanted to investigate, that we wanted to try out, but we just weren't motivated to do them, right? And then in comes COVID-19, and all of a sudden everything has changed, and the future of work is here right now. So we'll talk about a flexible future, a little bit about work-life balance. We'll talk about travel, real estate, what that might look like post-pandemic, HR practices and how those are going to change, employee expectations, and even spend a little bit of time talking about sustainability. So when we talk about these lasting changes, and I talk about the flexibility, what we're seeing is we've sent everybody home from work, even jobs that we said, no, you can't do this from home. No, we need everybody here. Companies that were 100% in-person organizations now have people working remote. And I think that the balance of the workforce is going to say, hey, now I know I can, I know that it would work. And I don't know that everybody wants to stay home, but I think even those organizations that had 100% got to be in the office, got to start the day, got to end the day in the office, all the time in the office, might be able to say, well, maybe not in the office every day, maybe 2 days a week, half days, something like that, but maybe would give some leniency to this idea of work from home, even if it's not 100% of the time, but giving that flexibility. Because really, as we move out of where we are today, there's going to be a long period where kids aren't going to be able to go to school, can't go to daycares, can't do some things like that, in which some families are going to need some flexibility, right? They're going to need some help with that sort of thing. So being able to understand how your organization could look post-pandemic from a flexible work from home program is going to be super important to the culture of your organization. And to that idea of prioritizing that work-life balance. And I don't know, is it work-life balance? Is it work-life blend? What is it? I don't know. Work-life balance to me looks like a teeter-tottering, like I give work a little bit more and then I give life a little bit more. But right now we're blending everything, right? We've got spouses and partners trying to both do their jobs from the dining room table. We've got little kids afoot and college age students and all this sort of thing, and everybody needing a little bit of time and attention. So we're learning how to work differently. Maybe we have school in the morning and we work a little later into the night. And so learning these new patterns and that sort of thing is going to be important. And as a leader, it's also going to be important to help your employees understand how to separate home and life a little bit. There's probably an idea that, hey, that report that's due, maybe if I just knock a little bit more of it out here at 11 o'clock at night, I'll be that much further ahead. And that turning off and turning on switches may be a little difficult for people. So helping our employees to navigate that. I also say sometimes I'll work at 11 o'clock at night, but maybe I went for a walk at lunch and I don't normally do that. I'm just working differently, but being able to understand that. I think something else that we have to understand is that if we can provide the tools to help people with this, I read a stat that said something like 6%, and it was online, so I'm sure it's true, like 6% of the American workforce is depressed, right? And when they peeled back the layers of where this depression comes from, it's parental guilt, right? For not being home with their kids, not being able to attend Johnny's baseball game or whatnot. So now that we've learned how to do this flexibility, now that we've learned how to do this this work from home, maybe we can figure out some of the work-life balance, because that whole depression thing costs us about $51 billion a year as organizations. And so there is a numerical cost to pay if we don't get this right. And I think we also need to spend just a little bit of time talking about how this is going to impact our business travel and perhaps our business real estate. For a long time in the real estate sector, they were looking at ways to recommission commercial real estate, I guess, if you will, or repurpose it, maybe that's what I'm trying to say. And I think, again, this pandemic has just kind of pushed things forward a little bit faster. But I do think that there's some areas of real estate that will be impacted and things that business leaders need to think about. We may have to change the way that our real estate looks. You know, we've had a movement for the last 5-10 years to this idea of an open workspace. Well, now, do I want to sit across from that guy who's coughing? I don't know. So perhaps looking at how we can privatize some of our areas within our offices may be important. Social distancing may be a thing for the foreseeable future, so making sure that we can provide those sorts of things, I think changes the footprint of the office space, the commercial real estate that we have right now. And I think it begs to be thought about, how are we going to address real estate needs in the future? So that's one area of lasting change I think will happen. And also travel. Poor travel industry has just been beat up through this whole COVID thing. But I think as organizations, we're learning that we can do some things without the travel, right? That we maybe can have meetings, those face-to-face meetings maybe aren't as critical as we once thought they were. Business travel and those expenses aren't as necessary as they once were. Even going to conferences and association meetings and things like that, I think have to be looked at again through the lens of how we handled those during COVID-19. With a lot of online work, a lot of remote or distance learning, those sorts of things. And I think that that's going to have an impact. So, post COVID-19, looking at the ROI of some of our travel and our real estate expenses, I think is going to be important. And HR practice, I'm an HR girl, so I've got to talk about HR practices because they will change. In a most basic way, when I was thinking about this, I was like, in a most basic way, it's going to change because we won't have as many people close together. We won't have as many people in a smaller or more confined space. So some of those issues that really pulled at the time and they, just at the bandwidth of our HR folks, investigations and dealing with employee relations type issues, those may diminish in the new way that we're going to work. So maybe then they can turn their attention to things that are much more strategic. But the one thing that I've noticed in this pandemic is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Davos Manifesto. It was, when all the big companies go to Davos, Switzerland to talk about the future and all that sort of thing, they signed a manifesto this last year in February or whenever it was. And basically the statement said that all these major corporations signed this, that all of their stakeholders are as valuable as investors, as their investor shareholders. So that means their workers, their communities, their vendors or partners, whatever you want, however you want to refer to them. But they signed off and said, these people are every bit as important to us as our investor shareholders. And so this has caused us to have to put our money where our mouth is, right? That has to mean that we are proving what we said in Davos, Switzerland. There was an article in Forbes not too long ago that was really just one company after another that are doing exceptional things. They're really building some bold initiatives that prioritize both their employees and their customers in these times. And these are examples of organizations that and new purpose or newfound purpose within the organizations, it's going to live far beyond the bottom line. So I think that the success of a lot of companies has been shown that the answer to the COVID problem or the pandemic problem wasn't about kind of a production mentality as much as it was the ability to respond in new ways and innovation and that sort of thing. Whether it was trying to deliver instruction online or giving employees the opportunity to work remote or shifting product lines from making this to making something that we need in times of this pandemic. I think that nimble capacity of organizations has really shown a light on those who are looking not just why do we do what we do or what is it that we do, but why do we do what we do? That's the focus. And figuring out that culture piece and that that vision piece for the future. And I think that that means that our HR folks are going to be tasked with this imperative to focus on human potential than just simply driving productivity. And I think that that's an interesting change that we're going to see. I also think that we'd be smart to think about how this has impacted our employees and how they're going to look at work in the future beyond that whole flexible footprint, right? And the work-life balance.
I think she might have gotten disconnected. I tell you, you're on mute.
I'm about to kick my husband off his internet. So
We're back on it. We're back on.
You're back.
yeah, we're back. We're back. Let me share again. So sorry, guys. This
No problem. No problem.
doesn't ever happen,
Part of
but
the
it
process.
does when you're, when you're on the hook, right? But lastly, about employee expectations, we just have a last few minutes here, but I do think that the expectations are going to go beyond that flexibility and beyond the work-life balance. But I think some people are going to look at their jobs and say, I was not considered essential during this time. And do I want to continue because of the next natural disaster or the next pandemic may render me non-essential again. So I do think that there's going to be an expectation that people are going to look for opportunities to work in jobs that aren't as fungible as they felt maybe that they were now. I also think those that were deemed essential are going to take a different look at their jobs post-pandemic. They're in the throes of it right now, but very interesting to me how the shift in what we thought was we couldn't live without and who was really important and who made the big bucks and all that sort of stuff, and who's sitting on the shelf right now while those frontline workers are the ones, and very often amongst some of the lowest paid people that we have on the totem pole, if you will. And so I think that people are going to look at that a little bit differently post-pandemic. So be thinking about those sorts of things. And then this whole idea of sustainability. I think, I live here on Maui, and just the other day, there was an article about how many more fish have come back since we don't have the tourists out on boats and we don't have as many fishermen out there and that sort of thing. But large numbers of fish that have returned to Hawaii. We've all seen pictures of the water in Venice, how much cleaner it is. And we just have to step outside to understand that our air is a little bit cleaner than it used to be. And so all of these things have perhaps created a pause for us to say, look how quickly, Mother Nature can respond when we backed off of some of the hustle and bustle that we just thought we couldn't live without. And so I think as we begin to reopen and as we begin to look at the future, we have to look with an eye to sustainability, to perhaps not put us back in a place where we once were, but to be able to understand that that we can make some changes, and we can make some changes for the good. Because I think, it's just, even think about if we're not commuting to the office every day, right? Something like 30 minutes a day for most workers is spent in the commute. So that's like, 4 or 5 hours a week that somebody's probably spending in their cars. So think about the stress level that goes down for the employee because they're not stuck in traffic. But also just remove that carbon footprint of being out on the roads, having all those cars out on the roads. So there's some good stuff that could come out of all of this, I think. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we're at with the changes that I think we're going to see post-pandemic. So what do we do to make sure that we're we're prepared for that? Well, I think we need to look at our systems and tools, because a lot of us threw a lot of stuff together to try to make this work in a moment's notice. So I think that we have to go back now and look at our tools. Did we choose the right ones? Do they collaborate? Do they talk to each other? And can we talk to each other? Can we collaborate in the future? You know, are our network capabilities strong and safe? You know, from cybersecurity kind of issues and that sort of thing. Did we leave ourselves vulnerable and exposed by some of the new ways that we're doing things, and what can we change to take us into the future? I think our policies and procedures, definitely. I think telecommuting, I think that remote access, business continuity plans, succession planning, I think is also something that we have to think about. And even PTO policies. You know, maybe that's going to take we need to look at those as well. And then just looking at our returns on investments through a new lens, right? We mentioned travel and real estate, but there's some other stuff that I think we can take a better look at as to their value and their relationship to our everyday work world. So with that, if there's any questions, I'm open.
Wow, very interesting, Jill. I agree with you on you know, the many different changes that are going to be happening after this crisis, and especially in the corporate world, and even like small companies, you know, with 3-5 employees. Are they going to start handling all their HR needs moving forward? And
Right.
as you said, a lot of the positions are going to take a whole different value based on this experience that we are going through. And I have a question for you and for Jesse. We'll or maybe let's introduce Jesse, because we couldn't do it.
Right.
Jesse, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll ask a couple of questions to Jill. Jesse, hello.
Sure, absolutely. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Am I there? Am I losing you guys?
No, you're here.
Oh, good.
Well, you were.
You.
Yeah, it looks like it's it looks like the connection's a little unstable here as well. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
That's okay. We can, if you can just go. I think for some reason my connection's. I can always give out my information later. But let's move forward with my connection's not very stable right now.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we will share Jesse's information
Yes.
chat later on. So, Jill, I wanted to ask you from Insperity perspective, like if I own a business, let's say with like less than 10 employees, how you guys can help me out to manage all these different changes that are going to be happening post COVID-19?
Right. So for our employees, we've got a couple of different options that I think could work well for our smaller employers, which is the lifeblood of who, you know, we really appreciate being able to work with those people who are kind of, you know, right there on the you know, front row of business development. And we can really help you to take your business to the next level, providing you all the support. And then we also have an opportunity that's a little lower touch and higher tech. So we have kind of both ends of the spectrum that's so that our small businesses can do what they need to do in the moment. I like to say that we step right in there with you, we walk alongside you, and we provide whatever it is that you need in order to be successful in the future. So as little or as much help as you think that you want, we can provide that for you.
I think that with all these changes, like working remotely and stuff, some of the HR stuff are gonna be like up in the air, you know, like, because it's not gonna be like the traditional way of working with your employees. So I think it's where companies like yours that are kind of like following up the trends and getting informed, learning how the different policies and regulations are going to change in the industry. This is like more important than ever to work with someone that is going to keep in compliance
Right.
Uh,
Right.
with
You know,
all
it's just like the legislation or the offerings that came out of Congress attached to COVID-19, you know, with our the CARES Act and with PPP and those sorts of things. To have an organization like Insperity that has time and the ability to read through the legislation, to know what it means, and to be able to understand it and help to explain it to the small business owners, you know, put our clients kind of ahead of the curve, I think, a little bit, because they had that extra support, you know.
And also, if some companies are going to allow their employees to work from home, do you think that there are going to be certain requirements that the company has to provide in order for the employees to be able to fulfill his responsibilities?
Yeah, so, well, I think it's a two-way street, right? I think also the employee is going to have to make some guarantees to the employer as well. So that speaks to the whole idea of making policy changes, right? Things that we didn't do before, we're going to implement. So we've got to put some structure around those.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another area where a company like Insperity could really help with that. We've been there, done that. And so, so we can help with some of those ideas. And I think one thing that is super helpful is the fact that we can kind of, in some instances, you think you have a great idea, you think you know, and we can begin to kind of play devil's advocate and think about what, you know, the unintended consequences of that. Maybe that's a better way to say it instead of devil's advocate, but because we work with so many organizations around the country of all different sizes, all different industries, we've seen things before. So you can leverage that knowledge and make it work for your organization.
Someone is asking me here, like if you have a way of tracking like the hours that an employee is working remotely with your system.
So, so things we have an entire time and attendance program, and different things can be set up. And you know, I would just challenge that viewer to, in some cases, it's going to be absolutely necessary. In other cases, is it as much about the number of hours that somebody works or the deliverables, right?
Yeah.
I think we've kind of pushed ourselves into this kind of results-only workforce, because I don't know if they're doing it at 2 a.m. or 2 in the afternoon. I just know that it got here when I needed it, you know? And so it may force us to think about things in terms of productivity versus face time, you know, which we used to rely on so much. But it may not be as critical as saying, here's the 4 things that I need from you this week. Get after it, go do it, you know.
I personally think activity will increase because
Yeah.
sometimes people spend a lot of time like chit-chatting on the
Oh, and I can look very busy, you know, and if you're walking past my cube and I click on my keys, I could be clicking on Facebook or shopping on Amazon, you don't know. But I can look very busy. So, and that's one thing that we've seen with this is like balancing workloads. That we're seeing that some people are working from home and they're working like crazy people, like they're just going nuts. And then other people are lacking for things to do. And so as leaders trying to balance those workloads for our folks to make them more realistic in a results-only environment.
I agree. So I don't think we have any more questions. So I don't know if there is anything else that you would like to add, Jill?
I will just, in doing a lot of research for all this, an interesting thing that I think, because I can turn any conversation into a generational topic, but you know, the one generation that's struggling the most with work from home? Guess.
Boomers?
The youngest among us. And you would think, oh no, they've grown up with all these tech toys, they know all this kind of stuff, but they are the group, the Gen Z, the youngest, those that are just now coming into the workforce, are struggling the most with this work from home. Probably because they didn't get a chance to come into the office and bake in their own structure, right, for how to handle my day. But they are overwhelmingly like 50, 60, 70% saying, I'm struggling with this. I need the structure. I want to go into the office. I don't necessarily want to work from home. I'm distracted all the time. And I thought that was super interesting. That's the least group that I would think would not like this environment. But it's true. So
That's very interesting. And you know what? It's funny that you mentioned, because my wife and I were talking about the lack of phone skills that my children have. They have to talk to their teachers, over the last few days, and no phone skills at all, because they are not used to pick up a phone, handle a call like back in the days,
Right.
And it's like, hi.
Wait, you talk on this thing? No,
Yes, exactly.
it's just to send emojis and stuff, right? Memes, right?
No, so that's why it totally makes sense what you just said. It says definitely things are going to change, or are already evolving into a new thing, and it's going to be very interesting to see where we end up after all this.
Absolutely. Hey, it's been great. I am so sorry for those couple of technical glitches, but
there were minor glitches, but thank you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting. We'll make sure that we share your contact info and Jason's contact info, and I hope that we can keep collaborating with Insperity, because I know you're
absolutely
an asset for small businesses in general, moving forward with all the changes that are coming ahead.
Right. We're happy to help however we can.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Jesse. If you
can hear us.
If you can hear us, thank you so much, Jesse, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Aloha, everybody.
Please keep sharing this presentation.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye, Jill.
Thank you.
Bye.